Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I want to talk about Lost Actions and Delubrum Reginae. Really, I guess all of the Boshin content as a whole. Now, with the recent buffs to time-worn artifacts that dropped from Delubrum Reginae for the Resistance Weapon questline, figured it was about time I maybe made a video with some pointers on how to put your best foot forward and really speed up these runs with either minimum or maximum effort. In just some random party finder that I made, we finished in just over 16. In fact, today we finished in 15 minutes and 29 seconds, and the time can keep getting better than that. I've seen sub 14-minute party finders go. So if you want to go really fast and you are willing to put maximum effort, consider joining party finders, but that doesn't mean you can't also just put some more effort into your random duty finder Delubrum. So I'm going to be giving you some pointers on things you can bring to really help speed up those runs. So let's get started. So first off, essences. A lot of players are concerned with obtaining essences and maybe having to spend what little gil they have, so they just don't bring them. Fortunately, it's never been easier to obtain essences to use specifically inside of Delubrum. Now there are a ton of different fragment and essence options in the Southern Front and Zadnor, but most of the best Delubrum stuff comes specifically from exchanging Boshin clusters for the variety of fragments that NPC offers. Clusters can be obtained by killing any 4th Legion monster in either the Southern Front or Zadnor, and as of a recent patch, it only costs 1 cluster per fragment. These give some of the best essences and, quite frankly, actions to use inside of Delubrum. Now for tanks, melee DPS, ranged physical DPS, and caster DPS, they're best off using these Boshin cluster essences. Tanks will want to buy Fortitude fragments, melee DPS buy Contention fragments, ranged physical buy Finesse fragments, and casters buy Clarity fragments. They all increase damage and even tankiness by a lot, giving you the best of both worlds. Healers, on the other hand, you can use your Divine Essence, but its damage increase isn't that high. It's really going to end up being for the tankiness. You'll more likely want to use Ether Weaver essences to help speed runs up. These are obtained from skill fragments, which can easily be farmed by killing random monsters in Zone 1 of the Southern Front. Again, the Divine Essence is okay, but Ether Weaver is just so much better for damage, even if it lacks any tankiness. You do have other options, of course. Templar and Ordained are good, but they do require more effort to obtain. And finally, Profane. It increases your damage a bit more than Ether Weaver, but it renders your heals nearly useless. It's fine in pre-mades if communicated, but do you really trust the Duty Finder enough to not have any heals? In fact, do you even trust yourself, to be completely frank? Now the other roles do have plenty of options. Skill fragments can be used for tanks, for example. Skirmishers can be farmed in the Zone 2 monsters from Awakening fragments. But again, just looking at Delubrum essences, and I think that's the place where they're needed most, those Boshin cluster ones are so reliable and so easy to obtain at this point. I would recommend that while farming clusters or fragments, if you're trying to work on multiple resistance weapons, it's a good idea to have the 20-20-20 memory step active. You'll get quite a few of those while you're farming for clusters or fragments. Also consider shouting for cluster farms or fragment farm parties in the Southern Front. It definitely helps speed things up by a lot. So now, all 5 roles, I've given you your preferred essences for Delubrum. And honestly, even if you just were to stop here, you are helping speed the run up a lot. Those longer, like 45, 50-minute runs, if everyone were to use an essence in those, a lot of the times those go down to like 30, 35 minutes. It's a big difference. But maybe you want to go the extra mile. Maybe you want to bring some actions and really juice things up. Well, let's look at some actions if you want to speed things up even more. Fragments and locations will also be listed on the screen, since I'm going to go over quite a few. First up, tanks. Tanks are definitely a role with some offensive actions, but to be honest, they're a bit more effort to obtain. I actually think the tank role can do some pretty supporty stuff that really helps speed up the run. One of my favorite things is Lost Impetus. This dashes you forward and gives all your party members in the immediate vicinity a huge speed boost. This not only helps speed things up by running between bosses, but it can also be used in the middle of a fight in order to help people dodge mechanics. You can also use it alongside a tank invulnerability to pop the mines in Delubrum ahead of everyone else to make safe passage in the few sections that do actually have traps. You can also just bring Lost Perception to find traps the old-fashioned way, and I see people bring both of these. They sprint through and they try to unveil traps that maybe they didn't walk over in the process. And honestly, it doesn't sound like a lot because it's not anything that increases DPS, but it's super appreciated in any group that actually goes out of their way to do this. Another cheap option that I think is okay for the tank role is to just bring Lost Bravery and cast it on people before each boss, but there's another combo of actions that can render this motion entirely useless, so this isn't one I super recommend. Now for outright personal DPS options, it comes from fragments that are just a bit more tedious to farm, and that's why I don't think a lot of people who watch this are going to go that far for it. Banner of Noble Ends comes from Zone 3 critical engagements in the Southern Front, specifically the Resolve fragments that you get. Font of Power comes from Sagacity fragments from Castrum, and Blood Rage comes from Cunning fragments from Dalriada. And if you end up with some, you can even use Banner of Honed Acuity, so long as you're the main tank. You'll need to run Breathtaker Essence, and you'll want to run Lost Impetus to proc Honed Acuity's effect. It's not that effective, but it's a lot of fun. Now, if you do want to buy these things, they're not too expensive, but I understand just not wanting to spend gil. Warrior does have another option with Lost Slash. They can use it during every inner release window, and those are pretty easy to farm as well. Honestly, with the tank roll, I think the offensive essence, at the very least, is definitely the most understandable. You don't have to bring any crazy DPS actions unless you really want to. Oh, and one last note on essences, I wouldn't recommend using irregular. It makes you take so much damage, and unless your cooldown usage or your HP is just really well off because of party buffs or things like that, you're probably going to die. I just don't normally recommend it in the Duty Finder. The pure essence is really good for this. Then comes healers. They have a ton of options, but there are a couple of really popular ones. White mages in particular often bring Seraph Strike, since Thin Air eliminates its massive MP cost, and you can get a bunch of these from Divinity fragments from Bostian clusters, making them super easy to get. Other healers can bring this, but honestly, pretty much any caster who wants to bring DPS actions might want to consider bringing ether kits. This is true for both healers and casters, like we'll mention later, but it's definitely going to help a lot, even if you are on White Mage with Thin Air. Chainspell is another popular one, regardless of the essence you bring as well. I still recommend Ether Weaver with Chainspell instead of Ordained. I know it's a popular combo, but the damage boost difference between Ether Weaver and Ordained is pretty significant. Banner of Noble Ends is again a solid option. Honestly, it's a solid option for every role, so you'll hear me mention it a few more times in this video. It just makes it so you don't take any healing for its duration, but it's just a good damage option if you happen to have it. Font of Magic is another huge buff, but again, all healers are going to need ether kits to deal with the drain, even White Mage. If you find most of this stuff is a bit out of reach, or maybe just not your flavor, it's a good idea to at least bring Lost Banish 3 for the Bojjan Phantom. It will make it take 25% more damage, and that drastically increases the speed of that specific encounter. I personally like to go Ether Weaver Essence, Seraph Strike, and Chain Spell when I want to really have a cozy time, with some ether kits. Next is the range physical roll. Fortunately for them, they have one very easy choice, Dervish. This comes from the same fragment as your pure essence of the Fiend Hunter, and is an excellent party buff. If your party has too many of them though, you're going to want to coordinate to make sure you don't overwrite them, but still, it's a nice reliable bring that a lot of the times doesn't show up in the Duty Finder. If Dervish isn't an option, then there's a slew of other standard actions that work fine. Font of Power and Banner of Noble Ends are both pretty normal. If you want to go something more supporty, Lost Impetus or Lost Perception, just like with the tank roll, work just fine on the range physical roll. If you're specifically a machinist, you can also bring Lost Slash. You'll want to reassemble beforehand every time you use it, but that does massive damage on its own. Then we have Caster DPS. This role has a lot of options and also a chance to screw things up. We'll get to that in a bit. First off, if you're using Pure Essence of the Elder, like I recommended, consider bringing Lost Cure 4. If you actually Cure 4 with the Elder Essence active, it gives everyone in your party of 8 a 1-minute damage buff. This is a 10% damage buff version of Lost Bravery, which is 5% higher than the normal action. It helps with healing, and you just have to press it once a minute to speed things up. This is, however, also why I recommended caution if you want to bring regular Lost Bravery as any other role, because this version of it will overwrite the other version. There is also Font of Magic and Banner of Noble Ends, bring ether kits like I mentioned with the healers, but the big one with casters is Lost Flare Star. This inflicts a massively potent 60-second dot on the enemy. However, only one Lost Flare Star can be on the opponent at any time, no matter which caster it comes from, which party it comes from, only one is allowed to be on it. This means that you should only bring this if you've communicated with your team and asked, hey, is anyone else using Lost Flare Star? If not, I can use it. Generally, the caster using buffs is the caster you want to be using this. Lost Font of Magic. You can even do Ordained and Chainspell. Chainspell is fantastic for the casters. Also, if someone's going really try hard and using int potions, honestly, anyone using buffs should be the one getting priority on Lost Flare Star. If somebody tells you not to apply it, probably means they're using buffs. And again, you'll definitely want ether kits for using all of this stuff. And finally, melee DPS. There are a few setups, and there's two of them that are really popular that are only really like one action different. First up is Lost Rend Armor. This comes from the same fragments as your Pure Essence and causes enemies hit to take 10% more damage for 30 seconds. 2 people with these in a group allows for 100% uptime if you just call Rend 1 and Rend 2, but it's a solid take that requires little to no effort to obtain that will definitely help speed up runs. Now, if you're using the Pure Essence, Banner of Honored Sacrifice is another popular one. Your Pure Essence of the Duelist reduces the Honored Sacrifice dot tick to 1 damage a tick, giving you all the benefits with none of the downsides. Definitely take this over Banner of Noble End so long as you're using the Pure Essence. But if you just want to use Banner of Noble Ends, you can do that too. It's just this one's actually better. And then Font of Power is your last major option. So I like to say that melee DPS comes down to one of two builds. It's either Pure Essence plus Honored Sacrifice, and then you either do Lost Rend Armor or Font of Power. Dragoon can use Lost Slash with Life Surge if they really want, as it lines up with every other surge, but most of the time you're just going to focus on one of those two options. Now those are some good recommendations across the various roles, and there are some fun little things you can do like Gambler Essence with Dynamis Dice, but these were the more accessible ones, I feel. There are some other things you can do. Light Curtains or Lost Reflect work great on the third boss. Its generic room-wide AoE and its Tank Buster can both be reflected. So if you just want to throw an extra, 150,000 damage on the enemy whenever they actually use it, it's a fun thing to do, but it's not as good as bringing other actions. That's why I specifically mentioned the Light Curtains from Zadnor. Honestly, Lost Full Cure, as a healer, can do really well also, especially if you have lots of casters or other healers using some of the high MP cost actions I mentioned earlier, since it does give auto ether to your teammates. Ether Shield from tanks isn't too bad. You get it from the cluster fragments for tanks, and it reduces damage everyone takes. Again, tank role I feel like is the most acceptable role to bring stuff that kind of supports the team, more so than actually helps kill the boss faster, but it's just an option. And like I said earlier, even just having everyone bring an essence and none of the actions I've recommended helps speed up a run by a lot. So if you can do that just with minimum effort, you're doing everyone, including yourself, a big service. Now again, I mentioned those aren't the only options. There are other essences, there are other setups, even if I think these are going to be your best options. So in the comment section, if you have a setup you like to run that you think is a little bit fun or you think increases your damage by a little bit, that just offers a few alternatives, feel free to throw it down there. I already mentioned Martialist and Skirmisher, and then there's other essences that increase damage as well. So you just need to pick and choose the ones that you think will be best off. Watcher Chainspell is another popular one for Black Mage, but I'm not a huge fan of it in here, as painless as it makes the runs as far as I'm concerned. But anyway, thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And best of luck on those Delubrum runs. I'm making every resistance weapon since the nerf. So, yeah, I got a lot to say about this. So thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. And until then, take care.